Welcome to the Afternoon Snack Podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Root. This is a podcast
Well, hold up. I want to be part of the intro, too.
Okay, go ahead.
Never mind. You can do it.
Okay. Like I was saying, I'm Meredith Root, former engineer, CrossFit Games athlete, and owner of Tactic Nutrition. That was the one and only Alex Parker, former lawyer, also a CrossFit Games athlete, and co-owner of Tactic Nutrition. This podcast is about fitness, health, nutrition, CrossFit, business, mindset, and things that grind our gears.
Wait, hang on. Ivy wants to say something. Go ahead, Ivy. She's shy.
No surprise there. Our goal is to give you something to think, talk about, hopefully make you laugh a little along the way.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I don't have time for your bullshit today.
Okay. I'll keep it to a minimum.
I highly doubt that.
Yeah.
Anyways, how are your feet?
They're sore. The tops of them hurt. It's weird. Like that bony part on the top. It's like, I don't know.
Is there a bony part or is it just like bones?
It's all bones. It's weird. It's like when I try to like cross my toes, that's what hurts. So I think it's muscle, obviously, but also it's just like doesn't feel great.
Do you often cross your toes?
To see if it hurts my foot, I do.
Is that like a new thing that you've started doing?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen those people who do like, they'll do weird stuff with their toes when they're sitting still? Like some people do with their hands, but they do it with their toes.
No.
It's weird. I used to notice it a lot in swimming, I guess because people are barefoot more often. But you'll just be like sitting there like at a meet or something and people are like working their toes. It's weird.
Like unconsciously? Subconsciously?
Yeah, just like it's like it's like a fidgeting thing. But they'll like cross their toes and uncross them, cross them, uncross them. I think maybe that's where my like hatred of feet came from. It's having to like stare at them as a kid.
Maybe.
They're so gross. Ugh. Icky.
I think I mentioned in our last podcast that I was having hip problems. And a couple days before like the marathon, I was like, my hip is feeling better. It was weird. It like started getting sore in like other spots on my hip. Like I had like DOMs everywhere. It was like the pain was migrating. And Meredith was like, maybe it's because you've basically been doing the equivalent of like 3 synchronized swimming routines with your legs per day. Because like every time I sat down, I would like lift my leg up to test my hip flexor. I'd be like standing up and like doing hip circles, and
it's like all that accessory work that you don't always do at the end of your workouts. You're now doing like 3 or 4 times a day, just like single leg pike ups all the time. It's like
I probably did at least 2,000 single leg pike ups.
Yeah.
In the week leading up to the marathon, testing my hip.
I mean, it's like, it's no surprise it was sore. And then miraculously, as soon as you stop doing that so much,
yeah,
it stopped being so sore.
Yeah. It was almost like a few days before the marathon. I'm like, it is what it is. And I stopped worrying about it and stopped doing all that stuff to it. And it felt better. So live and learn.
I mean, I told you that, but
I had to learn it for myself. Some things you need to experience for yourself.
I guess so. Anyways, we just got back from Chicago, home of the Magic Mile, Miraculous Mile,
Miracle Mile.
This is a frustrating story because every time Alex would talk about
I don't even remember what I was.
Every time the Magnificent Mile would come up, she would call it Miracle Mile.
No, I didn't. I was calling it something else.
No, that's what you were calling it.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But of course you don't remember that. So she would say it, and then I would correct her and say Magnificent Mile. And then she'd say it again, and I would correct her. And then we were having...
Is it actually the Magnificent Mile?
Yes.
Okay.
And then
and I was calling it the Miracle Mile.
Yeah.
Right.
And then your parents' friend called it the Magic Mile. And then I got so confused that I called it the Majestic Mile. Me, the one who knew the name all along. Your Miracle Mile and Magic Mile just got me so confused that then I couldn't remember what it was called. It was a real moment.
I think at least Majestic is close to Magnificent because there's a G involved.
It's definitely
but there's also
closer.
a G in Magic.
Magic's like the wrong number of syllables. I don't know how you do that one.
Anyways, it's the whatever you want to call it. It's far from magical, miraculous, magnificent, or majestic. I couldn't believe the number of people.
It was busy. It was like, and maybe, I think partially too, it was like sensory overload.
Mm-hmm.
Like we haven't been, not like Calgary ever really gets that crowded. Maybe Stampede. But we haven't been around people like that in a year and a half. And all of a sudden we're like in Chicago with thousands of people on the street and it's loud. People are like just being obnoxious. There's like Jesus freaks on the side, on the
with
corners
their microphones
and signs. I was like, this is a lot. And then we didn't even go. So it's like a big shopping district. We didn't really even go shopping because most stores had a lineup outside. So we basically walked like halfway up what is it called?
Magnificent
Mile. And then, turned around and went home.
At one point I was just like, Meredith, what are we doing? Are you enjoying yourself? She was like, I'm pretty much done here. I'm like, I've been done for 5 minutes. Can we go home?
The good news is we're definitely on the same page with regards to that. Like, I'm not one to like force an experience just because, and I'm not really a big shopper, so we don't really ever have to worry about getting ourselves into a situation where one of us is like, oh, I really want to go home, and the other one is like, no, we have to do this. Like, we're pretty much lockstep on those activities, I think, for the most part.
And then on top of it all, I wasn't planning on really doing much shopping because we had just spent $750 on COVID tests to get home.
That one hurt.
So that was a shocker.
Well, especially because when I booked those, so if you don't know that, like, to travel into the U.S., you have to get a COVID test. To travel back into Canada, you have to have a COVID test. So we basically took a test middle of last week to go to the U.S. and then had to go on Saturday to get one to get back into Canada. And when I booked them, they're not doing like free testing really anymore like they were, or at least it's not as prevalent. And so I found like COVID Center of Chicago or whatever, and on their website they had like a rapid, like an antigen test, which we aren't allowed to get for Canada, rapid PCR, and then like a 24-hour turnaround PCR. And I was like, oh, that'd be perfect. The 24-hour turnaround, it was like $180 or something. Still a lot, but not that much. And then we get there, and
well, first of all, we end up in an Uber where this guy, I think he thought he was driving like a go-kart.
It was basically like riding in a Mario Kart.
He was ripping around the Chicago streets like he was the only one on the road.
Taking shortcuts through parking lots.
But he would decide on a shortcut at the very last minute.
Yeah.
So we'd be like driving through an intersection, and then it'd be like, never mind, and like take a hard right.
Yeah. And I get car sick so easily.
Took the turn on two wheels.
I hate Ubers. I hate them. Partially it's because I have to sit in the back, which I hate. I can't sit in the back of cars usually because I get really car sick. And then you add on top of that the way that most Uber drivers drive, which is like they're the only ones in the car. I was like, I mean, you can keep driving like this, but I'm about 3 minutes away from vomiting in your car.
So we pull up, and this COVID of Chicago is an old like car wash.
Literally
basically
like
just like
a car wash bay.
It doesn't even have like doors on it.
I think they must have used it.
One wall is painted red, and it had
the front facade.
The front facade is painted red, and it had a white little cross on it, and I'm pretty sure there was a Band-Aid, like drawn on, like painted.
Yeah,
and it said COVID of Chicago. And when we pulled out, I was like, this can't be.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like somewhere you would dispose of used needles.
Maybe it's dual purpose.
It could have been. And it smelled like people who would use used needles.
It smelled like pee.
Yeah. No offense to those people.
Yeah, I don't think they listen to our podcast.
No.
But yeah, so anyways, we get in there and your mom had texted us right when we pulled up and she was like $375. But it would not be unlike her to just say that to be funny.
She always tries to pull our legs.
Very obvious though. So I'm like, no, it's not. And it was. Like we got in there and I was basically like, well, I booked online and it said $180 for this test, like the 24-hour test, and they were like, oh, we don't run that at this location or the other locations downtown Chicago. We only do the rapid PCR, which is a very expensive test. And you know, at that point you're like, what are you going to do? Cuz you're standing in that building. Your options are like you can leave, not pay. Try to like scramble around and find something else, but you don't want to be doing that the day before your race. Or you just, you know, pay them $375 and give them one of your kidneys and you're out the door with hopefully a negative COVID test. Yeah, that hurt. That hurt my heart.
That really hurt.
It's partially too, like,
I almost fainted.
Anytime something costs double what you expect it to cost, bit of a shock.
Literally, like, you're adding on $1,000 Canadian to any trip with that. Plus, not to mention the cost going out.
Yeah.
So that was a huge bummer. But
we got it.
The rest of the trip was good.
It was. You had your marathon, which went great.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you talk a little about that?
Well, I was pretty nervous leading up to it because the Chicago Marathon sends a lot of emails leading up, like about logistics. They do like a rating based on like how like the good or bad the conditions are going to be. And so as the week progressed, the ratings or the rating on the conditions went from like green, which was ideal running conditions, to yellow. And then they were saying like in the afternoon of that day, the conditions were going to be in the red, and that was just like based on heat and humidity. So a couple of days before the race, they were saying like conditions are going to be in the yellow, like you need to make sure you stay hydrated and all that. So that was kind of, I was worried about the heat, even though I had been training like over the summer, so it was fine. But then they were also sending emails about like there was a lot of stuff about like package pickup and then the logistics of the race, because there's so many people and like you don't just go to the start line. Like there's specific corrals you have to go to that you can't switch corrals. Like if you're heat, like I was wave 2 heat G, you're not allowed to go anywhere else, and they're all divided. So it's just like it was fine on the race day, but I was very concerned about like how logistically it was going to play out. Like then also my heat started at 8 a.m. and on the email they're like, we recommend getting there at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to have to stand in my heat corral for 2 hours. But then I knew somebody who had run the Chicago Marathon before, and they were like, no, you don't have to be there at 6 a.m. So they helped me through that. The expo to go pick up your race package,
which was like either Friday or Saturday. So either the day before or the day before the day before.
Yeah.
2 days before.
The lineup to get in, because they also had to check proof of vaccination or proof of negative COVID test. The line to get in was the longest line I have ever seen in my entire life. It had to have been almost a kilometer long.
Oh, I think it was probably longer than that. And it was in a building, which is crazy.
The building was humongous.
They do like auto shows and stuff apparently, so it's that kind of building.
But I ended up getting the race package, and that was all fine. But once the race got off, in a marathon, like you kind of expect people to kind of spread out throughout the course, but that never happened. There was just like, it was masses and masses and masses of people the entire time, and not just on the course, but also on the side of the course. Like there were certain parts of the course where the spectators were like 5 or 6 people deep.
Yeah.
And they had like, there was music going. There was just like people cheering. It was so loud. I actually ran into a woman at the porta potties in the lineup. And she was saying that she did it 2 years ago or before COVID. And she said that when she first did it, she had headphones in because she was used to running with headphones. She was like, that was a big mistake. I didn't need them. And I wish I didn't have them because I got on the course and I realized like there's so much going on. And to really experience the course, you don't want headphones. Like you don't need them to entertain yourself. There's just a lot.
Yeah.
Which there was.
I just did the math that if there's 40,000 people running, which I think was the estimation, that's 952 people per kilometer. So there's only so spread
I actually
out
think there weren't 40,000.
Okay.
I think there was just under 30,000 this year.
Okay.
So that's what I read on Instagram.
So still like 700 and something.
Yeah. So that's why, and it never let up.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because, and I said this on Instagram, but I started in the second wave, and they rank you they put you in your waves and your heats based on the times that you submit when you register. And I didn't do my registration. The people from Team and Training did it. So I guess they had maybe put me down for like a much slower marathon than I was planning on running. So I was with a lot of people who were slower than me. So I was passing tons and tons of people, which was a little bit annoying, but I just did it like it was going to be the way it was and tried to stay to the side. But there were a couple spots on the course over the bridge. They're like graded.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm.
But the grates are pretty wide. They're about the width of like the widest part of a running shoe.
Huh.
And on half of the bridge, they had like a red carpet. So everyone would kind of try to funnel onto the red carpet. And I was like, I'm trying to stay away from people because I'm passing so many. So I'm like running on this grate. And it was so sketchy. I almost had to like kind of like run on my tippy toes because otherwise you could potentially catch like a toe in the grate or the side of your shoe and stuff. But other than that, it was pretty smooth sailing.
So what was your final time?
3 hours, 22 minutes, 34 seconds.
And you ran how much longer?
About, I think it was like 0.75 of a kilometer. So almost a full kilometer extra. Which
I guess most people do because there's only like the shortest possible route on any marathon course is like marked by a blue line that runs down the middle. So if you're not running on that line, then you're going to run extra. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if you take corners wider,
or even if you take corners you're going to unnecessarily add different distance. But it's hard. Like when you're in a field of runners that's that large, it's pretty impossible not to do that.
Yeah. It would have been slower to try to run on the blue line.
Yeah.
Because and everyone kind of likes running in the middle, which kind of makes sense because on most of those roads, there's like a
camber from the...
Yeah, and so if you're running on the outside, there's, a bit of a slant, which I was like, I'm just going to deal with it. And like the slants changed. Like sometimes I would run on the left, sometimes I would run on the right.
Yeah.
So it's fine. But I think people just naturally were gravitating towards the middle until like the aid stations came and then they would disperse to the right or the left to grab water and Gatorade.
So was that was your goal time?
It was, my goal was 3:30, but throughout training I was like, I think I can run a sub 3:25 if I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
And I started out at my first kilometer was like a 4:52, which was what I was kind of planning on sustaining for the entire time but then my second and third kilometers were much faster. They were like 4:25.
So 4:25 would be around a 7-minute, 14-second pace.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa, Nelly.
Yeah.
We got to slow her down a little. And then I kind of just settled in around like 4:45 per kilometer.
Which is around 7 minutes 35.
Yeah. So, and the first half of the marathon was almost the exact same time as my second half.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, so I didn't really slow down much.
Yeah, I think that's uncommon for most people.
And then I did have to take a bathroom break. I think it was about kilometer I don't know if it was 5 or 15. Honestly, I struggling to really remember the details of the race. But at one point I was like, I kind of started feeling like I had to go to the washroom. They have been around like 12K.
Yeah.
And they have porta potties on the course, like different spots, probably every 5 kilometers. And I was like considering like, do I stop? Do I not stop? And I'm like, it'll probably just go away.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, what if it doesn't? And I'm also trying to consume a lot of liquid. So I didn't want to be like worried about having to pee. So I was like running and considering this. And then I saw the porta potties. And then I was like, if I see one on the edge that has like the green, because you know, like the green and red dots based on who's in there.
Yeah.
I was like, if I see a green one, I'm going to run in there. And I saw the green one. So I like, jumped off course, went straight into the porta potty, like ripped my pants down. Like I was so frantic, and then sat on the toilet. And I was like, 10 seconds of like trying to get things going.
Yeah.
Just like waiting, like, come on.
Everybody knows.
Can someone turn a tap on here? And then I went, and then I basically busted out of the porta potty and like tried to like regain. But again, there's like people along the sidelines.
Yeah.
So I ducked right beside this kid who was holding the sign. I was like, oh, I almost took you out.
You don't even know.
You don't even know. Rejoined the runners and was off and running.
Yeah, and you made up for that time as
Yeah.
best as
I
you
actually,
could.
because I had a bit of adrenaline from that experience.
Oh, sure.
So I ended up running that kilometer in 4:58.
Yeah.
So I really didn't lose that much time. I made it. I was like,
You must have run like a 4 minute.
Yeah.
4:10.
I think I did.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. And then we were kind of.
And then the next kilometer, I was like rearranging my shorts because I, frantically pulled everything down and then back up.
So they're probably twisted.
They were twisted, and then I had to figure out. And then at one point, like where I was carrying all my gels, like my fanny had been twisted around.
Yeah.
And it was so annoying. It wasn't like flat against my upper back or lower back. It was like rolled up and like kind of like flapping every time I ran.
Yep.
So I had to have one of my gels early to lighten the load a little.
At least you didn't lose any in the toilet. Can you imagine if you like pulled your shorts down to go to the bathroom and then all your gels fall into the porta potty? That's a story. That is a story.
That would have been devastating.
Yeah.
But I mean, the zipper was done up.
I know.
So I don't know how that would have happened.
It could have happened. Anyways. Yeah, we were kind of, we were trying to follow you around. So we caught you at the 2 mile mark, which is kind of running like downtown right by our hotel. And we almost missed you because you were on the opposite side of where we were standing.
Thankfully, my mom's voice I can pick out of a crowd. It carries very well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Mine doesn't. I'm one of those people who like I yell and somehow get quieter. It's always why I struggled with coaching CrossFit classes where the other coaches or athletes have to have the music all the way up. Because I'm like, well, I guess I'll do sign language. Like, I hate yelling.
I know.
But yeah. At that point though, so they had the app, like the Chicago Marathon app, and it had the little bubble and would show you where your runner was. And you were ahead of, like, there was a lag. So it was showing you like you hadn't made the turn yet. And then all of a sudden you were just there. So there was that. And then we walked from there because you were running north at that point. So we walked from there to like the half marathon mark. Waited. And we were watching the app and kind of figured, all right, like she should be like, based on maybe there being a delay, she should be here, around this time. We had the camera ready. We had the phones ready for video. Totally missed you, which is crazy because it was 3 people looking, and those team and training jerseys, the like purple and green, are really easy to spot.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how that happened.
I was looking for you guys around the 13 mile mark. And then it's weird because I was also looking, team and training apparently had a group that was going to be at the 21 mile mark.
Yeah.
Like just a cheering section.
Yep.
And I was looking for them and I didn't see them either.
Yeah.
Like honestly, the whole thing was just a complete blur. There was so much going on. I couldn't, I don't know how anyone even saw,
sees anybody.
Noticed anything.
Yeah.
At one point you're like, what was the best part of the course? I'm like, I don't know.
It all looked the same to me. You're like looking at the ground in front of you. The plan after the half, the half marathon mark was to hop on the red line, like the train, the subway, and take it south to like around the 21-mile mark. And I was so proud because this was like a perfect plan. I had the train schedule. It's going to work great. So we make our way to the subway station. We get the like subway cards. We go down there, and there's tons of people who are doing the exact same thing. They're trying to get on the red line and make it down to that, like to Chinatown. And so I'm like, I have the Google, like the train schedule on Google Maps, and it keeps delayed, keeps getting delayed. And it finally gets to the point where I'm like, hey, we're not gonna, even if we get on the train now, we're not gonna make it. Or it's gonna be very close. But also you're not guaranteed that the train's gonna even come, which I'm not sure that it did. So we kind of walk out, and I was like, well, if I start running right now, I can probably catch her. Because it was like a 45-minute, because I was like, well, I wonder what the walk is. So it was like a 45-minute walk. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to make it if I walk, but I can make it if I run. Because I can get there in like, 15 or 20 minutes. So that's what I did. I left abandoned your parents. They went to like kind of towards the finish line. Because that was when I had told you I was going to be around the 21-mile mark to like give you some Gatorade and run with you. And I was like, well, I don't want to let her down. So I started running, and I was keeping track with you like on the app. So I kind of see where you were. And then I saw, so okay, I'm probably not going to make it to the 21-mile mark, but I can make it to like the 23-mile mark. And so I was just running down like basically one block off from the route, and then cut over and was just running down the sidewalk. And it started to thin out a little bit once you got away from like Michigan Ave. And so I kind of like picked my spot where I was going to camp out and waited. But also my phone was dying. So I was really worried that like I wasn't going to be able to track you because my phone had like 4%. It was very stressful. But then I saw your little like thing coming, and then I was like staring, and I almost missed you again. So weird. But then I found you, and I ran with you, and I gave you Gatorade that you didn't need. And
yeah, sure I was worried that the Gatorade on the course was going to be like diluted, because sometimes that happens. But it wasn't at all. So I thought, well, if Meredith's going to be there at the 21-mile mark, she can hand me a Gatorade just in case I need it. I didn't actually need it, but I took a couple swigs anyways.
For my effort.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of funny. Like, I mean, not like I obviously run too, but essentially I ran like 5 or 6 kilometers to get to you. Got a little break, and I was running. It wasn't a jog. It was like, I mean, I had my watch going, so I know what my pace was. I was getting it, but I made it. Yeah, and then ran for like half a kilometer or so, and then peeled off and ran back to the finish line.
It was good to see you at that point, because the last, let's say, I want to say like, in my mind it was 6 kilometers, but it was actually 7, because I knew I was going to have to run that extra distance, like on my watch. It was tough. Like, that's when the race really started to get real. Well, it started to get real at like 27.
Did you ever hit a wall? Like,
no, but it was, everything kind of came on very gradually.
mm-hmm.
So it was like at the 21, at the halfway mark, like I had already started feeling my quads. I was like, hey, there's some I don't know how to describe it. It was like, they weren't getting tired, but they were starting to get like, you know that feeling when you haven't squatted in a while and you do a first set and you feel fine. And then the second set, you're like, my legs kind of are getting sore already. Yeah. They're not sore yet, but they're like, it's like they're going to be sore tomorrow. That's what was happening.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hope they hold out. And then my feet kind of started to hurt at like the 27. And then everything kind of was like fine. It just like everything was just kind of like tired. But so then I started like going by miles, because on the course they were counting down by miles. Like the people on the side of the course, like, you're 5 miles to go. And like, I could have sworn I heard 5 miles like on my watch. And then probably like 15 minutes later, I saw a sign up ahead. It was right in the middle. There was like a little like, bridge, and there was a sign that said 5 mile. And I was like, what? And I'm like, how could this be? And then I get closer and closer, and I realize it says smile.
Probably because there's like a camera or something.
There was, and I was
Hilarious.
like, oh my gosh. I could have sworn I was going crazy because I'm like, is that a 3? And I was like, no, it's a 5. But it was an
5.
S.
Hilarious.
But yeah, it was great. I mean, like, then at the very last part, and thankfully somebody had told me about this, but you're running along and you think you just have to keep going straight, and then you turn a corner and you're like 400 meters from the finish, and there's like a 200-meter long hill that's like pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
And there were a ton of people walking up that hill, knowing that you're that close and you have to walk.
Yeah.
But I think there were a lot of people who were dealing with cramping.
I saw more than a few.
Yeah. I saw some people who were in the heats who started like way ahead of me, who were like off to the side walking because I think they had cramped up. Then this was way like earlier than the last hill. And then you get to the top of the hill, you turn left, and then you have another like probably 150 meters to go before you cross the finish line.
Yeah.
And then I crossed the finish line and my legs were like, that's when they decided that they were done.
We're done here.
Yeah. But there were some people like really in bad shape.
Yeah.
Like puking and stuff like that.
Yep.
But it was great. I mean, I felt properly trained. Fueling strategy worked out great. Experience was wonderful. And wearing that team in training, like that's at least in the endurance sports, I think for marathons, like that's a pretty well-known organization. And so I was running along and I would just hear like, go team. It was kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's always nice to get a little bit of extra cheering.
Yeah. From people you don't even know.
Yeah. So whenever I heard that, I would put my thumb up.
Thanks, guys. Yep. Oh, that's great. And then the day after the marathon,
we flew home. I felt okay. And then throughout that day, I started getting really sore. But the night after the marathon, I got my period.
Close one.
Like literally like 10 hours later.
Probably.
Which I thought I was going to get it a couple days later. I like a couple months ago, I was like, shit, the timing is not good. Because I didn't want to get it on race day. Like I don't really get really bad symptoms. I didn't want to have to deal with it. And also sometimes I do get cramps and I'm like, it just wouldn't be fun.
Mm-hmm.
I've done CrossFit competitions and stuff with cramps and I don't think it really impacts my performance. It's just like, it's like having a headache. It's just like not fun to have to deal with on top of trying to perform.
You don't get luteal AF?
I don't actually.
Yeah.
At least I don't think I do. But I've read like everyone, well, I'm sure a lot of people now are familiar with Stacy Sims' book, Roar. Basically she argues that women are not small men and that their hormonal cycles need to be considered from a performance and training standpoint. And basically like, she says that based on the studies that she's read, when you're in your first phase, when your progesterone and estrogen are lower,
follicular.
Yep. You're most similar.
Specifically early follicular.
Yeah.
I guess.
So like when you're on your period, like the first 1 to 7 days, you're most similar to a man in terms of your hormonal panel levels.
I completely disagree with.
Yeah. You disagree with that. She says, so the first phase, you're more like a man, like you're going to feel better, you're going to perform better. You're not dealing with bloating, any of the like kind of PMS symptoms. And then you ovulate in the middle of the 28-day cycle on day 14. And then the second phase, the luteal phase, your progesterone and estrogen are both higher and you're experiencing these PMS symptoms. But what some studies have observed is that your performance is actually lower. Like there have been some studies that say like you don't I listened to a podcast and one RD said that you don't utilize carbs as well. There's a bunch of statements that have been made about a female in their luteal phase and the impacts. Like I guess like if you're in a skill sport, your skills can be impacted. So like hockey, for example, And like she makes references in her book, but interestingly enough, like she doesn't have footnotes or anything like that. It's just like in the back of the book's like chapter 1, and she lists all her references.
Her reference section of that book is infuriating.
Yeah, it's frustrating. But anyways, all that to say, and Meredith can go into this a bit more. For me, like I've known about these types of studies, and like especially Stacey Sims, and I've read her book, and I like it's kind of like the Whoop thing. Like you're almost self-handicapping yourself. Like if I go in and I have this like belief that I perform worse in my luteal phase, or like right leading up to my period, like I'm probably going to be self-handicapping myself just from a mental standpoint.
Because you're like, oh God, oh God, oh God.
Yeah, like, oh, my body doesn't utilize carbs the same way. Like, how am I going to perform to my same potential? Maybe I should run slower. Or you're in the race and you're like, oh, it's because of this, it's because of that. It's like, no, I just go out there and do it. Like, I don't actually believe that that's necessarily the case for all females anyways. And I don't think with the amount of research that's currently been done, you can even make anything close to a blanket statement.
Yeah, I think it's tempting to want to be able to say, like, we know this, this, and this, and because of this, that, and apply like some sort of law to women and say, this is the way it is. Like, these are the physiological facts. Like, go forth and train this way and eat this way at this time, and don't eat this, during luteal, and these can be your expectations, and strength gains happen here, and this and this. And that's a very tempting idea. It's alluring. It's like, oh, we have the answer, now we can optimize. But like the fact of the matter is, we don't have the answer. We have a very limited set of data. And like partially that's because women are really difficult to study, but also like a lot of the studies that are out there are so low quality that you can't even draw conclusions from it. Like, we were discussing this yesterday, and so I started reading through, like, once I could figure out what the hell, like, study Stacey was referencing in what part of her book. She makes that really difficult, and I'm convinced she does that for a reason. So I found a couple studies that she references, and one of them's done in young female athletes, and just for example, it says like, you can expect greater strength gains during the early follicular phase of the menstrual cycle, based on research. And so I found the research, and it's done in these young female athletes, and all fine and good. It's not a high quality study, but it does show like strength gains were more significant in the early follicular phase based on, I think there was like maybe 20 athletes included in the study. But just as an example of what confounding factors can be at play here, they don't control for other variables. So when you think about, and this is just me thinking, I'm not positive, and I can't say that this is definitely what happened, but this is just the way that my brain thinks. When you talk about calorie intake across a month, they're looking at like young female athletes, 18 to 22. And what we know happens in the late luteal phase is like, hunger goes up, cravings go up. Typically, if you're not restricting or monitoring calorie intake goes up by like 300 calories a day sometimes. And so you're telling me that you're not going to control for that, but you're going to assess the strength gains that occur in the week that follows a week of increased calorie intake. And like, that's a pretty massive confounding factor, in my opinion. You have a really well-fed athlete who is going to test strength numbers. Of course, they're going to lift better than they would later in their cycle after probably a period of either intentional or unintentional restricted eating, knowing that they overate. So it's just like, that's kind of what we're dealing with these studies. And it's why some of them are quite low in quality. And I don't know that we really should be making blanket statements or applying these concepts as a universal truth for all women, because we also know like it's very individualized from like length of menstrual cycle to the symptoms experienced. Like anyone or any female athlete or female who gets a period can probably tell you like, yeah, it changes month to month. It's not always the same. And some women have it worse than others. So I kind of prescribe to not Stacey Sims' school of thought, but there's this researcher out of the UK named Kelly McNulty, and she's honestly probably like the leading expert
just not as well known because she doesn't have an Instagram presence and she's not selling.
Yeah, I mean, because she's a PhD candidate. She's doing research right now. She's not selling a book. She's not on Instagram.
She's not doing webinars.
Yeah, she's on Twitter, but doesn't really do much. You can find her on Google Scholar.
She has a podcast.
She does have a podcast that's quite good. But essentially, she's done 2 really thorough meta-analyses. And if you understand the hierarchy of like scientific research, a well-done meta-analysis is pretty can be quite comprehensive. And so she included in her meta-analyses, in her assessment of the menstrual cycle phase on athletic performance in female athletes, which I think might be the title of it. You can look that up. They started with 4,000 papers or something, 4,000 research studies. And they started excluding based on quality and criteria and this and this and this, ended up with 78 that were the right design and high quality enough to include in the meta-analysis. And then based on the research in that meta-analysis, she found that there might be a trivial impact to performance during the early follicular phase, the menstrual cycle, which is the opposite of what Stacy Sims says. And that's just what's observed in the research. That's sort of a culmination of research. But just the fact that those 2 disagree kind of tells you where we are with the state of the research in female athletes. And Kelly is very, very adamant that any modification to training and nutrition should be assessed on an individual level, and that it really does start with the individual female athlete starting to keep track and log symptoms, energy levels, performance, this and that, because that
energy
is what
intake.
Yeah, and that's what should inform the training approach, not some sort of overarching dogmatic, view of the menstrual cycle in female athletes. Sorry, we got off track.
Yeah, because, I mean, for me, in my head, I was like, oh no, I'm going to be in my luteal phase.
Well, you weren't actually like that. Maybe early on.
For a minute, I was.
Yeah.
For a minute, I was. And also, there are months where I do deal with, certain PMS symptoms, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
I don't want to feel bloated on the marathon.
Yeah. I'm going to be bloated enough when I'm
done. But
then
at some point, you just have to be like, you know what? It is what it is. I've read about athletes who try to manipulate their cycles for competition. But the fact of the matter is, it is, I just think about how you would even do that for an athlete. And it's not let's just say you're a tennis player. Okay. And you have an event on June 14th.
Good day.
And then you have another event on July 1st.
Yeah.
And then you have another event on August 18th.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have another event the next weekend, August 24th. How the hell do you manipulate? Unless maybe if you're running, you're doing the Olympics or you're in a world championships, or you're like me and you're running one marathon and it's your job and you're making money and it means a lot, then maybe you can start manipulating things.
Yeah.
But that can bring a whole other slew of stuff. Anyone who's gone on and off the pill, that can have a real impact on your hormones and your cycle. And
yeah, more prolonged use, but
yeah,
Kelly McNulty
not
also,
even prolonged use. Going on it,
yeah,
the first couple of weeks can be really bad for some people.
For some.
Yeah.
But Kelly McNulty's other meta-analysis is on just that, and it's the effect of oral contraceptives on athletic performance. And same observation. Trivial impact to performance, very individualized.
Which is interesting because in CrossFit, I think it was last year, there was a whole thing going around about how a lot of females who were taking oral contraceptives were coming off of it because of the research showing that it has a negative impact on performance and overall strength gains. So again, it's you're
making decisions that, involve your body based on a very small pool of research. I don't think that anyone should go on the pill without a great deal of consideration, but for some people that have like PCOS or endometriosis or just
Or
have
really
very bad PMS symptoms,
Mhm.
like the pill is like a low dose hormone pill is a very effective way to manage those symptoms. And that might outweigh the risks or the potential downside, because if by going on the pill you get an extra week of higher quality training, well, that's going to negate any like, strength gains that come or strength impacts that come from it.
Yeah.
And like, hello, if you're on an estrogen pill, like that's an anabolic pill that is going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what we're saying is there's no like one size fits all approach, because the research just isn't there. And we're not saying like, your cycle does or doesn't impact performance. It depends on the person.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that keeping track of things can be really helpful, and figuring out what works. I have some clients who are like, hey, the week before your period, like we increase calories by 50 grams or 50 grams carbs.
Yeah. Or increase fat intake or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever feels good.
Yeah.
For like a day or two. Or it's even helpful to know, like, and this is, I work with a couple people who do track their weight daily. Maybe they're weight class athletes, maybe not. And so they know that their weight goes up by a couple pounds the week before. If you didn't know that because you don't routinely track your weight, but you're on a nutrition program and you're tracking your weight periodically, and you get on the scale the week before and you're like, oh my God, I've gained 3 pounds. You're going to panic. You're going to freak out. But if you know that because you track, in addition to other things and symptoms and, components, but you track your weight, it's not going to have that big. You're like, oh, that's normal. Yeah, it always happens. It'll go back down in a week. And that makes sense, right? Because like your body stores glycogen differently. It holds onto water for about 5 days. Your weight's going to go up. You're going to look puffy. You're going to feel fat. You're
going to text your nutrition coach and be like, what's going on?
You're fired, but also I still need your help. You did this. It's like, whoa. Like maybe you're just paying closer attention than you normally do.
That's a great message. You're fired, but I still need your help.
Yeah. Give me someone else on your team. Let me talk to your manager. It's super common, but I think and like this is just the narrative around the menstrual cycle and period and stuff. It's not something that is, I mean, it has been for many years a taboo topic, the female body generally. Like, you're in a restaurant, you gotta like, oh, I gotta change my tampon. So you like fidget around in your purse, and then you like shove a tampon in your pants because heaven forbid someone like see you walk to the bathroom. Like it's a human body. Like 50% of the world's population is female, maybe more. Like why
That's
is
so
it?
True.
Why is it that something that everyone goes through has to be held in such secret?
Or how about when you're in the bathroom and you're like trying to unwrap it as quietly as possible, and then you put in that little like metal garbage, and you're like slowly closing it so it doesn't make that like clearly it's the metal like.
Yeah.
Because God forbid the stranger beside you knows you have your period.
Yeah. It's like you're like opening it. You're like. I'm having some crackers. That's not what you think it is.
Why is that? It's so weird.
I don't know. It's
like even when I first started dating you, it's like
happens to both of us. And it's like, it's like you're like, I'm going to take the garbage out again today, all the way out to the dumpster. It just, I have a thing with garbage.
Yeah.
But, anyways, all of that to say, if we just pay more attention to our own bodies, you start to pick up on patterns.
Yeah.
And those patterns are what matter, not the patterns that a researcher or, someone trying to sell a book matters.
Yeah. And then at that point, you can start experimenting with certain supplements or, I don't know, for me, it's like painkillers.
2 Advil, 2 Tylenol.
Yeah. And I'm talking like this in the most like aggressive
not
approach.
Opioids.
Yeah. I'm not yeah. So like if I know I'm getting my period, like as soon as I know it's there or whatever, I just instantly take like two Tylenol, 2 Advil, just to like avoid the process of, dealing with any cramping. I find that helps a lot. But then I know some there's some other ways that you can help. You can increase, like I read one of our clients, who's one of Lindsay's clients, increases magnesium supplementation.
Yeah.
Around that time. You can also increase, like, you can also manipulate your macros, like higher fat, higher carb, lower carb on certain, phases. Some people find that beneficial. So but it's so personal and individualized.
Totally, yeah. And the one good thing, like, not to say Stacey Sims is a kook. She's not. She's really smart. She, I think, was tenured at Stanford or like one of those crappy schools. But so obviously she knows her stuff. But in the one good thing that she, oh, not one, but one of the good things that she's done is she has gotten people talking about this.
Oh, yeah.
Has probably inspired a whole lot of other researchers to ask the questions that need to be asked, and to maybe design studies in a way that, can answer questions, or, definitively say, like, we're not going to have an answer to this to apply universally, and that's okay.
Yep.
Women are just special, and we all know that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was listening to this podcast on the way home. It's a running podcast I listened to, and they had an RD on, and they were busting nutrition myths. And one of the nutrition myths was like, or they ended up on the topic of carb loading. And I was like, this will be interesting. I wonder what she has to say about it. And she was saying that females don't benefit as much from carb loading as men, and specifically don't benefit as much from carb loading in their luteal phase. And I was like, ugh. And then she goes on to talk about her anecdotal evidence on carb loading, because she ran a marathon once and she ended up eating 350 grams carbs to test it and didn't really notice a difference. And I was like, okay.
So they were busting.
Why would you say that on a podcast? Like, you're busting nutrition myths, and then you're gonna use your own anecdotal evidence to talk about a nutritional strategy that's extremely, like, well known and been researched to be beneficial for endurance-based athletes
of any sex.
Of any sex, yeah. Like,
so she busted a nutrition myth with a nutrition myth.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Or did she bust a non-myth with a myth?
I don't know what the myth, what that led, like, what was the myth that led to that conversation. I think the myth was that sugars are bad. That was the myth.
Interesting conclusion to draw. Or, like,
because then she was basically saying sugars can be really beneficial for endurance-based athletes, and then they got into the topic of carb loading.
Oh, okay.
And then she was giving her own.
Yeah, I mean, that's
2 cents on carb loading.
That's not really true.
No. For me, and Meredith too, for her half marathon, I consumed 550 grams carbs the day before.
Crushed it.
I really did.
Yeah.
Which isn't hard for me, because I'm not a big eater.
But you are a big carb eater.
I do like carbs. So it, like, of all things, like, carbs were definitely the easiest. And then at my fat, I basically was like, okay, I'm not going to have fat targets or protein targets. I'm going to prioritize carbs, and whatever, like, fat and protein ends up at, that's fine.
Which is, yeah, that's totally
like,
fine.
knowing that they were going to be low. So I ended up at 55 grams fat and 64 grams protein. Roughly. I had to estimate a few items because we ate out a couple times. But
I think if you aren't, like, if you're not familiar with doing it, or not, like, I think you do have to work to keep your fats low, because if you let your fats start drifting up, then digestion really slows down, and then you just start to feel kind of bad.
Yeah, like, there was a couple points in the day I'm like, dang, I wish I could have, like, a cookie or a donut, something like that, because, that's carbs, but it also does have a lot of fat.
Yeah.
And that starts to add up. Like, even 55 grams fat, and I didn't eat anything that had fat in it. It just kind of adds up.
Yeah.
Like, a significant amount of fat, I mean.
Yeah.
I think I had a tiny bit of almond butter in the morning, but the rest was all, like, carb-based stuff with just, like, miscellaneous fat.
Yep.
In it. And then the 2 days before that, the Thursday, Friday, I tried to keep protein a little on the lower side and fat. And then I ended up eating about the same amount of calories as I usually do, but I shifted the ratio just to include more carbs. And then my training volume had gone down quite a bit that week as well, just from the taper.
Yeah.
So I was pretty stocked up on glycogen. But should I talk about what I ate?
Yeah. For like the day before? Sure.
Yeah. So just to get an idea of like what 550 grams carbs looked like. So the big thing for me, and Meredith helped me with this, was the night before I like planned ahead, because you can't just like go by, you just be like, oh, I'm just going to eat 500 grams carbs. Like, especially if you're not used to eating that much. Usually I eat around like 350.
Yeah.
So eating an extra 200 is a lot of work. So I planned it out, and I started early because you don't want to leave anything till the last minute, because then you're, if you have to eat like 200 grams carbs in one sitting, that can be quite uncomfortable. So I got up and I had about like 55 grams of carbs in oatmeal and some rice cakes and banana and jam, a tiny bit of almond butter, as I said. So that meal had like close to 90 grams carbs, like right off the bat. And then we went out and we bought one of those acai bowls.
Yep.
Which had like honey. I didn't get any peanut butter or anything on it. It had cocoa nibs.
I believe it's cacao.
Cacao nibs. Those were delicious.
Those
Some
good.
granola was in there.
Yeah.
And then fruit. So that had 100 grams carbs. And then a few hours later it had, like, we were out. It was when we were coming back from the Miracle Mile. And we stopped at Bao
buns.
Yeah, bao buns. So I just got like a big bowl of rice with a bit of like teriyaki chicken on top. So with the bowl and the white rice, that was 170 grams carbs. And then throughout that morning, I had also one of those big bottles of Gatorade, which was 50 grams carbs. One of those like Kellogg's Rice Krispie Squares, but like the long ones, like the family size ones that you get at 7-Eleven. So that was 61 grams carbs.
Minus the bite that I had.
Minus the bite you had. And then I was just kind of like grabbing a couple nibs here and there, because if you know me, I like my nibs. And then for dinner, I had we went for pasta dinner, so I had some pasta, and it had a little bit of like ground beef in it and pasta sauce. And then before bed, I had a couple bowls of Frosted Flakes and some more candy. So really, like, I didn't have any vegetables that day.
No,
I had some fruit, but there's no sense in filling up on vegetables for the day before, because it just kind of takes away from, like, it takes up space. I always recommend for people who are carb loading, like, you still want your fiber to be relatively high. And by high, I mean like around the same ballpark that you usually eat.
Just like 25 grams.
Yeah, because like otherwise you could deal
poop
with some constipation problems. Usually that wouldn't happen in like a day, but
no. And if you're eating like cereals and granolas and stuff like that, you'll get it in.
Yeah, and even like oatmeal has some fiber in it. So yeah, that was a day. It definitely was like an effort, and I was totally that nerd who was like carrying around a Gatorade bottle the day before, like, I'm running the marathon, gotta curb up.
I mean, you weren't running like a random running shirt, so that's, at least you weren't doing that.
Yeah. But that 100% helps carb loading. I will say that you can't just like, if you're eating like 140 grams carbs per day and you're running a marathon this weekend, that you should start by eating 500 grams carbs the day before. Like, you have to build up to that. And also how much you eat for carbs depends on the size of your body, how many carbs you normally eat. If you've practiced carb loading, there's a number of factors you have to consider.
Yeah. So usually with people that we work with, endurance athletes, we like, obviously they probably have something on their calendar from a competition or like a racing standpoint. So we always try to, in the months, like the weeks or months leading up, just practice a carb load, like the exact numbers that, like on one of their long runs or whatever on the weekends, have them carb load 2 days before, just like you would for a race day, and just make sure that they can tolerate it. And it's a good way to start practicing that.
Yeah. Like an ideal goal for a carb load, and again, there are a few different factors to consider here, but you take your body in kilograms, and then you multiply it by like 8 to 10. And that's the number of carbs that, would qualify as a carb load.
Yep.
And then the morning of, I had almost 100 grams of carbs before the race, which started at 8. So
You were up early that day.
Yeah, got up just before. I got 5, I think, because we left at like 6:30. So I had some oatmeal and then rice cakes with a small amount of almond butter, some bananas, and then coffee. And then I had some, like half a bottle of Gatorade, like while I was waiting for the race to start. Usually I have those Stinger gummies, but I gave them to Meredith and then forgot to grab them before I went into the start area. And then during the race, I had a lot of carbs.
Yeah.
They had aid stations with water and Gatorade every like 1 to 2 miles. So I think there were 18, they said, aid stations.
Yeah, there were loads.
So I tried to get in 20 grams of carbs every 20 minutes. I had 6 gel packs with me and then tried to get Gatorade. So I had a gel pack every 8K and then tried to get Gatorade in between.
Yep.
And then when I took the gel pack, I tried to time it with the water station so I could have water with the gel.
Which is pretty important.
It does make a big difference.
Yeah. So a lot of people will struggle. And this can either be because they haven't practiced with gels or gummies. But sometimes people will they'll take them and they won't drink any water, anything with them. And so what happens there is you end up with this super concentrated, like bolus amount of sugar in your stomach that needs water to be processed properly. So the best thing you can do is take a gel and then have like 2 to 4 ounces of plain water with it. Like nothing, no Gatorade, no sugar, nothing in it, just plain water. That helps dilute it to the proper like osmolality so that it can be like transported across your GI membranes into your blood system. If that doesn't happen, if you just take the gel and you don't have a lot of fluids in your stomach, which tends to happen when you're running and exercising because you're sweating, then what occurs is your stomach, in order to process this thing that you've just eaten, will pull fluids from your body into your GI system to help digest the carbs that you just ate. So sometimes that's fine. Other times it can start to cause like some GI cramping, muscle cramping, that kind of thing, because you're sort of unknowingly dehydrating yourself a little bit. So always recommend plain water with gels.
Yeah. And make sure you test out the gels and know what flavors you like.
Because we have different preferences for gels.
Yeah.
I like fruity gels. Strawberry, salted watermelon, pineapple.
The salted watermelon isn't bad. It's okay. It's the only fruit one I'll take.
Yeah. And I hate the chocolate vanilla, like cappuccino ones. I think they taste like disgusting pudding knockoffs.
I had a couple cold brew ones out there.
Mm-hmm.
Those were good. One of my clients, his favorite is the Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And I hate that one. It's too sweet. It tastes like the those Coca-Cola candies.
Yep.
Which I never liked, the gummies with the sugar on them. I was just not a fan of those.
Yeah.
But he loves it. And then they have a birthday cake one, which I like too. But the coffee ones are like, there's a caramel mochaccino or something.
Yeah.
That one's pretty good. Salted chocolate. Those are my favorites.
Yeah. But you had, so for the race, you had a strategy pretty much mapped out. Like you knew exactly what you were going to eat, exactly what you were going to drink, and at what intervals it was going to happen.
Yeah. Like I kind of had to go a bit by feel for the Gatorade in the water. Like it was also way warmer than I was expecting. So I tried to get in more fluids than I could. I started getting a little nauseous at the end. So I think I skipped a station because I was like, I can't do anything right now.
Yeah.
And then I was fine by the next station.
Yep.
So you have to go, I went a bit by feel, but luckily, like, I don't know how it is for a lot of the smaller marathons. Like, I don't think Calgary had quite as many water stations.
Well, I think that was also a COVID thing.
Oh yeah, that too. Also, if you're ever running a marathon, the strategy is to grab the cup, pinch it, and then put it in your mouth. Because if you don't pinch it, the water just sloshes all over your face.
Yep.
But I was saying I don't think that I wouldn't have held up at that pace without such a great nutrition strategy. Obviously, I'm a little biased because I think nutrition is very important. But having done some long training runs up to like 35 kilometers without the amount of fluid and the amount of carbs and without the carb load, I did not feel as good. And I didn't bounce back after the marathon quite as well.
Yeah.
Like I felt pretty good after, like energy wise. Like I didn't feel like I was super dehydrated, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I did have to go straight to a hotel to go to the washroom. Number 2.
When you finished?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to have to use another porta potty, but I held off.
Instead, you walked into the Hilton, said, I just finished a marathon. I'm going to need a face mask and please point me to the nearest bathroom.
Pretty much.
Which I'm going to bomb.
Yeah.
But better at the end than in the middle, which I'm sure happens. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good job. I know I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
I think it's pretty impressive. I don't think people realize what it is like to run 26 miles at that pace. It's not something you can just do because you're good at running. Like it actually, you need to train it. So.
Yeah. I mean, there was a couple little niggly injuries along the way where I had to cut a couple runs short. But other than that, I didn't actually skip any runs.
Yeah.
In my training. I really prioritized training and like stuck to my paces and was disciplined and diligent. It paid off.
And you were still, so like your training was still only 3 days a week of running.
Yep.
Plenty of gym work. I mean, like just, 2 weeks ago you snatched 170, which is pretty impressive. It's like a big lift for you generally. And it happened in the middle of marathon training. So I think it's interesting. The combination of traditional strength and conditioning training with endurance added on top. I think what you did was particularly impressive. I mean, like, you know, I'm medium impressive. You're really impressive.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome.
I think I'm going to run another marathon. So stay posted.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you qualified for Boston, so I feel like that should definitely happen.
Be a good excuse to go to Boston.
I think so.
I think that's it. That was overall. I will say, I'm sure you saw on Instagram because we've done like 3 different posts about it. But, thank you, like, for all the support, even just, you know, clapping hands on my stories about great runs that I had throughout training, but also if you donated to my fundraising efforts, thank you so much. Like it made a really big difference. I know that the people who work at Team and Training were just beside themselves with not only how much like I donated, but there were about 200 people who ran the Chicago Marathon in fundraising for TNT, and total together we all raised over $600,000.
That's crazy.
So I think that was a pretty cool number to hear. And probably won't do it again for a while because I think I sucked my resources dry. But if you are somebody who wants to run a marathon like the Chicago Marathon or even San Francisco or one of the bigger ones, and it's hard to get in, you have to enter into a lottery. A really easy way to get in is to sign up with one of these organizations and fundraise a little bit of money, and you can get a free entry. And it just kind of makes the marathon extra special. So highly recommend. If you guys have any questions about it, you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to help you.
Yeah.
If I can.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening as always. Thanks for following along, everyone who messaged and commented on the tactic stories on the weekend. We really appreciate that. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys soon.